welcome to each one of you friends. This is a very innovative and new program that both Bombay Chartered Accountants Society and Chamber of Tax Consultants conceived and have brought before you. Any economy, for any economy to progress further, the securities market are most important factor. And now that we have new government in place, everybody is obviously very confident, and our belief is more than strong that अच्छे दिन आने वाले हैं. So in that backdrop, it is very important that we keep abreast of what are the changes happening, what are the issues, what implications are there for professionals, chartered accountants and other professionals in terms of the securities laws. And friends, it is not just enough that you need to be an auditor of a listed company, or there are various areas through which there are implications which in course of the day we will understand from the expert faculties. Friends, for this first session we have Jayant Thakur, who has kindly stepped in as our strong batsman in place of Bhagirath Bhai Merchant, who unfortunately is down with some viral ailment and is not able to make it. So my sincere thanks to Jayant we were saying that as active members, volunteers of Bombay Chartered Accountants Society and Chamber of Tax Consultants, we are so fortunate to have so many such, I would say, as our assets who can help us at a very short notice. So he is going to take us through the basic concepts of securities laws, and I request Neha Ben to introduce Jayant Bhai. I'll not take much of your time in any preliminaries. We are already a little late, so I'll now request Neha Ben to introduce Jayant Bhai.
Good evening, friends. It's a great pleasure to introduce Jayant Bhai. Jayant Thakur is chartered accountant by profession and has cleared in 1986, has been qualified in 1986. He is the author to several books like Takeover Regulations, Buyback of Shares, ESOPs. He also gives his monthly column on SEBI and corporate laws for BCA and securities law, and he's introduced securities law to chartered accountants, and he's a visiting faculty at NM Institute of Management Studies and at UTI Institute of Capital Markets. Now I request Nitin Bhai to please hand over the moment as a token of our love and affection to Jayant Bhai.
Good afternoon, friends. If my voice is reaching the last show, we can start. Good afternoon again. Friends, this half-day workshop, you would have seen the schedule. The first topic today is to cover the basic concepts and basics of securities laws. And over the next 3 sessions, we will be going into individual specific areas in more detail. So what I will be doing is that I will be covering certain basic concepts and making an overview of the various important regulation laws which are now in the very, very wide gamut of what is very loosely called securities laws. And I've been just trying to assess the audience mix, and I'm told that there are people who are familiar with securities laws, people are quite new. So I'll try to be somewhere in between, and particularly focus on issues relevant to chartered accounting and other practitioners, particularly whether in industry or in practice. So broadly, what I'll be covering is some basic concepts in securities laws. What are the principal laws there are 3 principal laws, 3 principal statutes, and there are various regulations, there are various guidelines and so on. And as we'll see later on that most of these guidelines also have statutory status. In fact, one of the topics of today, clause 49, does not have a status of principal law or regulation, but it has got a very strong binding force. Then we'll be dealing with substantial and procedural issues, enforcement, penalties and prosecution. And as I said, we'll be focusing on issues relevant to chartered accountants, and people are not really very much detailed in this area to avoid becoming too technical. Before I go into some individual aspects, what I want to highlight some few how securities laws is becoming more and more relevant to chartered accountants and other people who are in industry, to be company secretaries, lawyers also. As chartered accountants, we are of course auditors of listed companies and various intermediaries like stockbrokers, mutual funds, and so on. I'll deal with how SEBI is viewing again and again auditors which were otherwise governed by Institute of Chartered Accountants, how SEBI wants to have a strong role in governing them one way or the other. Independent directors, more and more chartered accountants are there. Audit committee members, of course, this is our bread and butter, so to say. Chartered accountants are almost always deep insiders. This is something which will deal separately in a separate topic, but I want to highlight again that chartered accountants, being CFOs, auditors, internal auditors, advisors, we are deep insiders. So if we trade in the shares of a particular listed companies in which we have any professional relationship, we should be very careful because we will be hit by the insider trading regulation. And generally, at least to my friends and whoever, I tell them that if you are dealing with a listed company or even an intermediary which is a listed company, do not deal in their shares as a rule. Don't try to see whether the trading window is open or not, whether you have access to unpublished information or not. Just don't trade because the range is so wide, and there have been so many cases where persons like CFOs, they have traded in the shares and then they are caught and then they realize they fell foul one way or the other. And what, as we'll see again one more later, is that chartered accountants are put at a much higher bar. So they are told that if suppose another type of person is there, he will be said, okay, ignorance of law is some excuse. There is obviously no excuse, but it is some excuse. For chartered accountants and lawyers, ignorance of SEBI law is absolutely no excuse. So in fact, there have been some of extracts I'll try to relate in some of the case laws. So CFOs also have a direct role under the corporate governance as well as the key managerial personnel under the New Companies Act. There are new regulations, some of which we will deal with, like investment advisors. Some of these regulations are relevant because unwittingly we might violate these, because what we may be doing in our regular practice, we might end up being actually investment advisors or portfolio managers or research analysts. We may not sound, we never intend to do investment advice as part of our practice, that is our impression, but if you see the wide definition, we'll see that later on. Powers of SEBI are ever increasing. I don't think such large increase, some of which are like SEBI has got now powers to arrest people, search and seizure, they wanted to totally keep it in-house, but fortunately after some to and fro, lawmakers made some sense and took away totally exclusive powers of search and seizure. I want to highlight, for example, one case of Bombay High Court in Pricewaterhouse case. This was a Satyam case, and many important points were made in this decision. What has happened, if you all know about Satyam, what happened, and Pricewaterhouse with the auditors and a couple of people from there were arrested and put in jail. I don't know whether they are released now. But what happened is that in that case, SEBI issued a show cause notice, and it was such widely worded. It issued a show cause notice to Pricewaterhouse, the auditors, and said that according to us, you have done all these violations, you have not done your work properly, and whatever. And they said, now we want to blacklist you. We want to debar you from auditing the any accounts of any listed company, not only just listed company, but any other entity associated with the capital market like stockbroker, all these intermediaries. So we will debar you from there. We will do this, we will do that, and so they had taken one extreme thing. They said you have done all this, there was malicious intent and everything, and you have done your work negligently. So many things they had put in their show cause notice. Pricewaterhouse argued that first of all, you don't have any jurisdiction to even issue a show cause notice to me. We are chartered accountants, we are governed by the Institute of Chartered Accountants, so you have no business even to issue the show cause notice. They straight away went to the Bombay High Court. And Bombay High Court, gave a intermediary somewhere, in between the decision, but whatever it gave, still it has got some long-term implications. First is that it rejected the, Pricewaterhouse argument that SEBI has no jurisdiction. They said that institute is in its place, SEBI is in its place. You are an auditor of a listed company, and listed company may have millions of shareholders. If you see of the whole industry, and if you do something wrong in your audit, you are causing, they have given so many examples that retirees may be there, widows may be there, and their money could be lost. So you cannot say that a SEBI will not take action against you if you do not do the work of a professional work of a listed company properly. So they rejected that argument. They said that SEBI had jurisdiction, so notice can be issued. Can SEBI debar? Can SEBI say blacklist and say, okay, for the next 5 years you will not audit the accounts of listed companies? Yes, they said that SEBI does have power. So these two things are important things, that whether institute debars you or not, what are their benchmarks, how they will govern. But SEBI has got this power, there is no way out. Two other things which they rejected, which SEBI had said, is that what first is that to decide whether the auditor has done his work properly or not, the guidelines, the standards, the SAPs and other things which have been issued by the institute, these will be the guiding benchmarks. SEBI cannot say that okay, the audit should have been done in this way. So if there is, for example, professional negligence, the criteria will be what institute has suggested and not by SEBI. So that some part has been given. The other important thing which he has made, but it has said in passing. So let's see how it happens. But what the Bombay High Court said is that there should be some sort of intention to do wrong. So the auditor should have connived, for example. It should have been part of that conspiracy. If it has merely done its job bad, for example, it has done its job negligently. As we'll see in the third case, in case of merchant bankers, in some cases they said you did your work negligently. There was no mala fide intent. Here they said that there should be some mala fide intention should be there, and then only SEBI can do something. So if it is pure negligence, then it will be between the institute and you. So this is the landmark. The last word obviously has not been said. This matter, I am sure, will go to the Supreme Court, and there will be a lot of to and fro. But sir, these things we have to keep in mind. This pyramids case is another by Securities Appellate Tribunal is again very, very relevant, in the sense that they have given very important remarks regarding independent directors and audit committee members. Pyramids case, if you recollect, it is one of the most scandalous case, and one of the most well investigated case I have ever read. It's just for curiosity. If you are reading a thriller novel, instead of that, do read this SEBI decision. That an IPS officer, if you remember what happened in Pyramid side in the case, that to do some market manipulation, somebody made a forged letterhead of SEBI and issued a courier from SEBI's address and issued to the to the company, and then it got revealed to the market. And there was a lot of price movement, and a lot of people bought the shares. And it's a very interesting thing. SEBI appointed an IPS officer, it's very competent, and she investigated the whole matter in such a way that she actually traced the alleged culprits, that how they met in, for example, Dadar. She traced through the GPS, identification from their mobile phones. So, they investigated even step by step how they gathered at a particular Pritam hotel at Dadar, and then they went to Fountain. Everything was traced, and they found out that there was a conspiracy. They caught people, but apart from punishing other people, they punished the independent directors and audit committee members, and then they debarred them. And the remarks which are made, they are worth reading. They have given exact role that audit committee members, what is their role, and in respect of finance, in respect of accounts, audit, and so on. So again, this is relevant for chartered accountants. Merchant bankers, many of them are auditors. In fact, in Keynote's case, the top merchant banker, who was managing director there, was a chartered accountant. And in fact, he gave as his defense that I am a chartered accountant. I am of 25 years, standing, and I have been giving lectures. Sometimes I wonder if some of these apply to me. So he gave all this as defense, and the SAT and SEBI and SAT went around and said all this in fact goes against you. Being such a chartered accountant with so much experience, you should have been even far more careful. You are a literate person. You are financially literate more than anybody else. So these are the point of saying all this is that as far as SEBI law is concerned, SEBI has raised the bar. The SEBI law has raised the bar for chartered accountants. If by chance if you are caught, as compared to a layman, if you are caught doing something even unwittingly wrong, the punishment expected will be slightly more. let's deal with some concepts. Securities is a very wide definition. Generally, SEBI deals, the SEBI laws deal with securities, and that too generally listed securities. We will see later on that some unlisted securities are also covered, maybe by intention, maybe not, but that's a different thing. But generally, securities means all shares, debentures, futures, options, share warrants, everything, which very wide definition is there in the Securities Contract Regulation Act. It's worth reading. So all these, any of these securities, if they are either listed or proposed to be listed. So if you are making a public issue, like we'll deal with, for example, Sahara's case. In Sahara's case, they did not list their shares, but they issued OFCDs, optionally fully convertible debentures. And one of their defense's argument was that OFCDs are not securities, and they gave legal opinions and all that. And then SEBI and SAT and then Supreme Court finally decided that OFCDs are very much securities, and they rejected the argument, and you know where that gentleman is now. So the securities are to be listed or proposed to be listed, that is a basic coverage, and therefore company whose shares are listed, they are a listed company. That is how the concept comes. SEBI's background, if you go to see, technically speaking, SEBI is exactly 25 years old today because it started in 1989, sort of as a government's department. Then in 1991 there was an ordinance, SEBI ordinance, and that was made into an act in 1992. And we have seen SEBI in 1992 initially just trying to control the two stock, Bombay Stock Exchange mainly, and try to get it under its grip. If you remember G.V. Ramakrishnan, was SEBI chairman at those times. But then scams kept on happening. Initially the real base work was done thanks to Arshad Mehta, and then Ketan Parekh, and then Ramalinga Raju, and Subrata Roy, and now perhaps DLF. A few days back we have seen the DLF decision. It's very interesting. It is not as far-reaching as, let's say, Sahara or Satyam, but there are certain issues there which makes one worry that now whether the powers of SEBI will further increase, because this is a case where SPVs were used. That is one of the ground. The SPVs were used and they were sort of, so to say, offline. They were not technically connected with the company. So how SEBI will make laws to cover entities which are associated? We all know about associated entities, related parties, and so on. But suppose the structure is such made that for example, in this case, wives of directors were made shareholders and so on. But control was substantially with the company or the promoters. So maybe I'm sure some more laws, it's already very complicated, and I'm sure DLF will see yet another level of complication. The broad framework of quickly, there are three basic acts, various regulations and rules. Mainly the regulations are relevant, rules are mostly procedural and registry. There are various guidelines which SEBI started most of the things as guidelines, and then gradually some of them became regulations. There are various circulars, there are case laws by SEBI, SAT, courts. There are a lot of informal guidance which should be dealt later on. And if you just see the bare law, if you just see, for example, SEBI's 2 volumes, SEBI manual, they run in by just roughly counted something 3,500 only of the bare law, and they keep on regularly getting amended. So first, the statute here is which one needs to look at if one tries to dip into securities laws is the SEBI Act. It is a short act, and it is only, if you really go to see from practical relevance, there are only a few provisions, but otherwise it is the base. Just 30 odd sections are there. It is enabling, empowering, and enforcing. It has got powers. Basically, it has got powers to make regulation to deal with individual areas. So really, on a day-to-day practice, we may be dealing with takeover regulation, insider trading regulation, activity regulations, and so on. So that is where the source of the power comes from here. So all these details are there in subordinate regulation. Basically, SEBI has introduced one more thing here, is that each of the intermediaries, the way that it controls it. Earlier, it wanted self-regulatory organizations also, so that those will be registered, and then, for example, merchant bankers, if SROs are there, they will govern them, and SEBI will govern the SRO. But that never really picked up, because somehow leaving it to SROs did not give the enforcement confidence. So now SEBI registers each and every type of intermediary, with a stockbroker, underwriter, banker, and so on. So registration gives them total power. They can do inspection, they can suspend them, punish them, and so on. The next statute is the Depositories Act 1996. It's basically procedural. It governs dematerialization and authorities to deal with dematerialization. The original SEBI law, you could say, was SCRA, Securities Contract Regulation of 1956. It basically it intended to govern stock exchanges and listing and the whole objective was to ensure that, if you remember, Bombay Stock Exchange was at one time just under a tree. So people used to deal on a total faith basis, that people used to buy and sell shares from each other, knowing who the other persons are. And there used to be and stock exchange all over India, wherever people could meet under a common tree or whatever. So what they decided was, instead of that, there should have a proper stock exchange. And the whole idea of SCRA was that anything done outside the stock exchange will have to be done in a particular manner, or they are illegal. And that is why there is a very common concept of spot contracts, spot delivery contracts. It means if you are carrying out a trade, and this is very routinely violated, and only when some trouble comes, then you realize that you have violated this and there are important consequences. Spot contracts is if I deal in let's say if I got Hindustani or 1,000 shares, and I want to sell them to somebody, I could go to the market. But a friend of mine may say that, no, I want to buy the shares from you. And why to pay brokerage and charges and all that? Why don't you just... Now, of course, there are tax implications. If I sell in the market, I save on tax, that is a different issue. But if I want to sell the shares, those will be governed by this spot contracts regulation. And then, the simple requirement is, if I sell, I have to give the delivery and the payment has to happen within 24 hours. If that does not happen, then the transaction is void and, technically even an offense. So what happens is, many times people, suppose I have sold the shares and I say, okay, no problem, give me money after 15 days, the transaction is void. So, the whole objective was to stop off-market transactions and deal only through the stock exchange. That was the objective. But unfortunately, because of this, that is why, if you give an option to somebody that, okay, I'm selling the shares to you, but okay, I promise that after 3 months I'll buy back from you if the price is fallen down. Some sort of this type of contract you make, it will be null and void. The problem here is that these type of spot contracts not only apply to shares of listed companies but also to unlisted company shares. And there have been various decisions on this. And there is a slide for private companies, shares of private companies they won't apply. But for unlisted public companies, of course, there is a slight grey area here, but generally they would apply even to shares of public companies. That is once again, the issue raised by Sahara. They said we are not a listed company, why it should apply here? But then the same concept was applied, that it is there is nowhere it is stated that the shares have to be of a listed company. These three statutes were there, and these three were, although they are mainly governed by SEBI, the idea was to merge these three laws and avoid the contradictions, because one of was of 1956, one of 1992, and another of 1996. So there was a Justice Dhanuka committee which gave a very nice report. It's worth reading even today now, and it gave a very detailed proposal how these three laws could be merged. Some of this committee report lapsed. Last year, Justice Sri Krishna made an even more ambitious effort. And it has said not only these three laws, but almost all the laws governing the financial sector, for example, Foreign Market Commission, insurance, part of what Reserve Bank is dealing with, all these laws should be merged, and a unique approach was given, that there should be principle-based law. Instead of the law trying to go into every minute detail, there should be principle-based law. It's a very interesting report, but I don't know what will happen to this, because there are people who are quite in favor of this and people who are against this, and there are problems within the bodies also. Reserve Bank of India is, for example, quite resistant to this, to give up its power, because in that case what will happen is there will be one regulatory, financial regulatory, as in UK for example, and that will be, RBI's role will be substantially curtailed, FMC might even go away, and IRDA also might merge. So there are various proposals, but let's see what happens. I really doubt whether it will come into force very soon. Even if it comes into force, it could be in a quite modified form. Let's come to one important statute, so to say, listing agreement. Listing agreement was never really a statute. It was really a simple agreement between the company and the stock exchange, whereby the company agreed to certain conditions of listing. So they said that, okay, you please list our shares, let them trade on the stock exchange, and I agreed to certain terms and conditions. That is how it started. But as soon as SEBI came into force, it took control of this listing agreement. Basically, it was an agreement between the stock exchange and the company. So when SEBI came into force, it took control of this and said that we will totally control this now. Any change which has to be made has to be made with our approval, that's number one. And in any case, if any change has to be made, we will direct them. So for example, clause 49, which was recently changed, we'll come to that. Nobody changed it. SEBI just issued a circular, this listing agreement is now changed, and now this is what you have to adopt. So that is, and listing agreement contains various other things, procedural issues, how board meetings will be governed, what will be reporting, price sensitive information to be given timely, and so on. transfer of shares and so many other things. Two important clauses which are there, one is always surprised that how come clause 49 is part of listing agreement, which is not really allowed. Because if you go to see, listing agreement does not have the backing of a statute. If there is a violation, what are the consequences? Till very recently, there are actually no consequences. At best, what the stock exchange could do was delist the company. And that is no answer to a violation. You cannot have such an extreme situation. Then the SCRA Act was amended in a slightly ambiguous way, but some sort of penalty was laid down, a large penalty, if there is a violation of the listing agreement. But corporate governance clause 49 lies there. So in a way, the statutory backing of corporate governance is little shaky. And that is why, as you can see later on, I was just seeing the presentation of Shailesh Bhai, is that these listing agreement is proposed to be converted into regulation. Once they are converted into regulation, all the punitive powers will follow. For example, then SEBI will be able to penalize any person who has violated, including the audit committee members. Today it is using its extraordinary powers and issuing various, but it, for example, cannot live with penalty. So then, once they are converted into regulations, if there is a violation of clause 49, there will be actually penalty. And penalty we'll see later on, it can be quite large. The other important clause which is there is clause 41, which relates to quarterly and other disclosures, which is again entities concerned with listed companies have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. I already dealt with the deficiency that why this listing agreement is there, and this same deficiency we will see in respect of guidelines, that the enforcement value is a little shaky. If it becomes regulation, then it will have a more statutory format, because regulations are part of made under SEBI Act. The violations I have already dealt with. If they become regulation, there will be more consequences. Till now, SEBI, stock exchange does not very seriously take is unable to take any serious action, and SEBI uses the extraordinary powers and gives all sorts of directions. These four regulations are just listing here. They will be considered separately for the today's other sessions. Take-over regulation, provision of insider trading, corporate governance, as clause 49, and settlement regulations. So let's deal with some other regulations. One is what is so-called FUTP, fraud and unfair trade practices regulations. This is if you take away takeovers and insiders, this is the most day-to-day applied, and it is so widely framed that many of the ills in the stock exchange will come under this. So it is very widely, and if you see the case law which come on SEBI side or elsewhere reported, probably 50% of the cases are reported for violation, because in India price manipulation and frauds is so commonly occurring. Of course, some of these are past ones, but even today, so this is something which a person has to deal with, read very, very thoroughly. The definition of fraud and price manipulation is so wide that so many things are covered. Let me give an example of front running, which has come into news very recently, and again it's relevant for chartered accountant. Front running is, suppose I am a stockbroker and a client comes to me and says that I want to buy 10 lakh shares of X company. Now the 10 lakh probably in that particular case might result, if I go and buy 10 lakh shares on the same day, within a short time the price will shoot up by, let's say, 10 or 20%. Now if that shoots up, I might get this malified intention that why I should if the price is 100 rupees, why I should allow him to buy between 100 and 105. Why should I not buy, let's say, 1 or 2 or 3 lakh shares myself, and at a lower price of 100 or 101 or 102, and then buy for him? So what will happen is that if I buy from 100 to 3 lakh shares, the price will go from 100 to 103. When he comes to buy, he will get from 103 to 130. So effectively, he is losing 3 rupees, which is going into my pocket. So that is front running. He's running, and he's come to me. So I run myself first. I run in front of him and take advantage. That is front running. So there was a specific provision relating to front running. Unfortunately, the way it was drafted was it governed only stockbrokers. So if a stockbroker, carried out this front running, then it was deemed to be a fraud and it could be punished. Then several cases came. In some cases, what happened is a mutual fund. The employees of a mutual fund carried out certain transactions. Mutual funds are literally can often be movers because they buy normally in lakhs of shares. So when they buy in lakhs of shares, they can move the market. So they have got a research department. The research department says, okay, now we have decided to buy X company shares. Go and buy 5 lakhs, 10 lakhs, 20 lakhs worth of shares, because they are lots and large. One of the employees thought that why not have a tie-up with somebody else. So it seems that SEBI realized that they had a tie-up. So he used to call it, okay, in the morning, today we are going to buy so and so, so he started buying. And then once he comes to know that the guy has already bought, he will start buying on behalf of the stock exchange, and then the other person makes safe profits at the cost of the